Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 142. And the title of this episode is The Federal Reserve is Not Currently Forecasting an Economic Collapse. And the reason why I put that up there is because of all the news that came out today, the Fed minutes, and what has been going on in the world. And we have to remember that Ben Bernanke said this back in 2008, right before the crash of 2008, where he says that the Federal Reserve is not currently forecasting a recession. So, and this is why I'm putting this here today, because something is coming, something is happening. They just don't want to let us know. But before I get started, I just wanted to thank every single person that donated. I know Soft Frog on the People was heading up donations for the site. And for those people who donated, I really do appreciate it. I thank all of you for taking the time and just donating whatever you have. And again, if you're like on a fixed income or you can't spare it, do not donate it. I'd rather you go out and buy prep supplies, gold and silver for your family. And but, you know, if you have extra money and you want to help out, that's fine. But I think your money should go towards your family, gold and silver, food, water, medication, and things like that first. Okay, let's get into the economic collapse news. We are seeing a lot of things happening today, and we see that a lot of the retail chains are not doing well. For instance, we know that Walmart, we understand that Nordstrom's, Barnes & Noble, Costco, Macy's, and now we're seeing Staples is not doing well. Also, office supply retail chain Staples announced that the Q2 financial results that are weaker than they expected. We're also seeing now Target is coming in, and they have warned on Wednesday its annual profit was likely to be near the low end of its forecast. And they also went on to say that Target expects U.S. shoppers to remain cautious in the face of ongoing household budget pressures. And, you know, it's a nice way of putting it. What they're saying is, oh, for all those people, because we know the number is very high that are unemployed, can't afford to go shopping. Those who are underemployed are not buying all those ridiculous household gifts and whatnot. They're just buying what they need. And because of this, our sales are going to be lower. Well, that makes sense. Now, I know in the headlines today in the news, they're saying that the housing market has hit all-time highs. And you have to remember, this is really old news because they're going, back a month or two and saying, from this is what we're seeing now. But my question is, if it's at all-time highs, why do we see the following information come out? And what's funny, they present this information right next to the information that's telling you that housing's at its all-time high. For example, U.S. mortgage applications fall as rates push higher. Applications for U.S. home loan fell for a second straight week, and higher interest rates reduced refinancing activity. Okay, now that was right next to the sales of homes are hitting all-time new highs, that mortgage applications are plunging, and it's pushing people out of the market as the rates rise. We're also seeing now, if housing is doing so well, and I hate to say this, most Americans do not pay for their houses in cash, but what we're seeing right now is these big investment companies paying for all the homes in cash. I wonder where they're getting all this cash from. Why would mortgage companies lay off people if the housing market is booming? Yesterday, I said the 1-800 East West Mortgage is closing down their offices. We also heard about JP Morgan laying off around 700 people from their mortgage office. And now today, Wells Fargo is cutting now up to 2,300 mortgage jobs. The country's top mortgage lender has said it expects the pace of mortgages lending to slow for the rest of this year as higher interest rates cut into demand for refinancing. But if the housing market is doing so well, aren't there people going out there, getting their mortgages, buying their homes? They wouldn't be laying off these people because in a real boom, like we saw prior to 2008, there were no layoffs of mortgage companies. Actually, they were adding people. New ones were popping up. Only until the very end did we see offices close up and a lot of them shrink. But now we're seeing this happen right now. So there is no way that this housing market is doing well. And we also see other layoffs. Disney just reported that they're going to be laying off 175, and that's the ABC TV group. BlackBerry, 100 people. American Platinum, 7,000. Cisco, I think I mentioned this before, 4,000. Pratt & Whitney, 400. And Digital Risk, 112 people. So we're seeing more and more layoffs, and we are going to see more layoffs on Wall Street come this fall and winter. And they're expecting those to be around 100,000 people. Now, we know the Fed came out with its minutes, and as always, they say nothing, and here are some highlights of what they've said. A few on FOMC, urge patience, others favored QE tapering soon. FOMC minutes show broad support for Bernanke tapering timeline. FOMC participants said sequestration clouded the outlook. FOMC participants predicted GDP to pick up in second half of 2013. Well, gee, I wonder how that's going to happen because they just changed the whole GDP calculation all the way back to 1929. So, yeah, that's a good prediction. Almost all FOMC participants backed contingent outlook for QE. FOMC said June payroll report showed continued solid gains. Yes, again, if you continually manipulate the calculation of unemployment and you don't count those people who have part-time jobs as full-time jobs, and you don't count those people who are no longer looking, you get this fantastic unemployment number. Okay, now, there was some discussion, and there were a lot of different news articles coming out that the White House stopped aid to Egypt, and there was another one saying they didn't, and it finally came out that the White House rejects halting Egypt military aid. They really can't halt the aid to Egypt. That is a strategic location. They fund everything through there. There is no way that they're going to stop anytime soon, especially with the war coming up with Syria and all the preps that they're taking. And that's why Saudi Arabia said, don't worry about it. If the Western countries do stop, we will continue giving aid. And that was just a way of the U.S. Funneling money through Saudi Arabia back to Egypt. Now, under the U.S. treaty, the bilateral securities treaty, if allies, including Japan, are cyber attacked and they cause some type of physical damage, the former U.S. Undersecretary of Defense, Michelle Flournoy, suggested that the U.S. under this treaty would get involved. So any ally that is cyber attacked and there is harm committed to that country, the U.S. would come to its aid. So here they are preparing for a cyber war. And this goes on to say, if there were threats in cyberspace that would actually translate into physical world, it seems to me that a case where our mutual defense obligations would apply. The U.S. government is increasing security steps against cyber attacks that could cause serious physical damage, such as train derailments or drinking water contamination, and has indicated its willingness to cooperate with Japan and others in tackling such serious cyber attacks. And the other thing I mean, this is all in the prep for World War III, because the new way of attacking countries are through cyber attacks. And if you shut off the power, or you make a nuclear facility go haywire, or if you cut off the drinking water, these are physical attacks on the system, and these treaties then would be enacted, and countries could come to the aid because it's an act of war. And Japan right now is creating their own version of U.S. Marines. Now, we have to remember the Japanese um, trained with the U.S. and taking an island, just like the island that they're fighting over with China. They use amphibious assault ships to do this, and right now, the new force that the Japanese are creating, it will be just like the U.S. Marines. And this says that the ministry plans to purchase 4 AAV-7 amphibious assault vehicles, which are also used by the U.S. Marines, and they're going to purchase this in the current fiscal year, because everything that they're doing is prepping for this war that is coming up. All these drills and all these things these countries are doing, they are prepping and strategically moving their assets to get ready for what's coming. And they already know what's coming. This is the only people that don't know what's coming are the people who are listening to the mainstream media and don't realize what is happening in the rest of the world. If you really dig deeper, you can see what is happening. Just like with the housing. I mean, you see layoffs. You see mortgage applications dropping. You see builders saying that their foot traffic is starting to slow. You see all of this happening, and mortgage rates starting to rise. And people who are watching the mainstream media are seeing that housing market is getting better. And they're going out and they're going to try to buy houses, and they're going to try to, either flip a house or buy one to live in. And a couple months later, their houses are now worth half. And I saw it happen right before 2008. A friend of mine bought a house, and they bought at the height of the market, and it was probably about a month later, their house was worth almost three-quarters of what it was. And then 4 months later, it was like half of what they purchased it for. Okay, let's move on. Now, for these countries to get ready for these cyber attacks, they have to have a cyber division. So Russia is creating their own cyber troops. And the Russian Defense Ministry plans to create a separate branch of military forces, which is called the Cyber Troop, and to ward off cyber attacks. And the main task of these troops is to fight the cyber threats from other countries. And basically what Putin says here is we need to be prepared to effectively combat threats in cyberspace, to increase the level of protection in the appropriate infrastructure, particularly in the information systems of strategic and critically important facilities like the power grid, the water supply, our nuclear plants, things like that. Now, Iran realizes that Israel, the central bankers, the United States, is never, ever going to let up on their goal to get Syria and Iran onto the US dollar and make them use that as the reserve currency, and to set up private Western central banks and oust the leaders of these two countries. And they realize that the wars are being fought with drones. So what they're doing now is that Iranian school kids will now learn drone hunting skills to find these drones. What else? The other thing that Iran is doing is they are producing a new state-of-the-art fighter, and they are unveiling new submarines soon. And they'll be unveiling the domestically designed, built submarine in the next few months. And all these countries realize that something is definitely going to happen, and things are progressing quite rapidly right now. And a couple reports back, I talked about how the UN Security Council was going to come into Syria and inspect the chemical weapons, and Syria invited them in, and Russia said they wanted an unbiased opinion. So they're inviting them into the country. And today, the UN Security Council's there, and all of a sudden, there was a chemical attack that killed people. Now, we're going to have to use common sense on this one. If you're inviting the UN Security Council into your country to inspect your country to prove that you're not using chemical weapons, why would you use chemical weapons? Because it's all over the mainstream media that Assad has just used chemical weapons on their people, and the UN Security Council is looking into this. It makes no sense. Most likely, the rebels, the paid mercenaries, they already knew that the UN Security Council would be there, and this was completely set up as a false flag. And, again, the last time they did this, President Obama was out there screaming they just crossed the red line. Netanyahu was out there saying that they crossed the red line, and what they're doing now is they're erasing that red line, and they're drawing another red line, and now they crossed that one too. And they're just trying to make their case so they can get into Syria. And it looks like this was another last-ditch effort to try to get Congress and the American people. And something was wrong because France was out there, the UK was out there. They were all reporting how the Syrian government used chemical weapons. And it was just too much of a push. It was just too good. It was too perfect. And it just reeks of false flag. And this is their last-ditch effort because eventually, with everything that they've been pairing with the underground CENTCOM underground base that the U.S. government has, with 200 and something officers in there, which it's missile-proof. They have the troops standing by in Jordan. They have the paid mercenaries that the U.S. government trained. They are working with other countries to establish a no-fly zone. And, General Dempsey was out there, and he's telling the U.S. officials that that this war, if they start it, is going to be costly, and it might not do what they want it to do. If he only knew that they were really going in there to remove the heads of these countries, to replace them with a puppet regime, just to get private Western central banks into the country and make these countries sell their oil for U.S. dollars only, he wouldn't even be involved in this. But he went on to say that the use of U.S. military force can change the military balance, but it cannot resolve the underlying and historic ethnic, religious, and tribal issues that are fueling this conflict. And it also goes on to say that General Dempsey said imposing a no-fly zone against Syria would cost the U.S. $1 billion a month. And he said it would put U.S. aircraft at risk of being shot down. So this is a very expensive venture, and by doing this, this would be the catalyst that would start World War III, because we have to go back and we have to remember all the things that the central bankers, U.S. government, Israel, all tried. They tried the chemical weapon route. Nobody cares. Most of the people in America and Congress, about 70%, if I'm remembering this correctly, the poll said that we shouldn't even be involved there. They tried to bribe Russia, Saudi Arabia. The king tried to bribe Putin to step aside while the U.S. goes in there. He didn't take it. They tried to assassinate Assad, and they made this big whole stink about Al-Qaeda taking over the government, and under the act of terrorism, the U.S. would be able to go into Syria, but that didn't pan out either. So now they have nothing left. I mean, they're trying the chemical route again, but the American people and Congress are just not up for going to war. They don't care that much there. So something else has to happen to bring the war into Syria and to get Congress to declare war on Syria. And the only way that this can happen is with some type of an event, a false flag event, either here, most likely here in America, where I am, to scare the people, to make it bloody and blame it on another country. Now, does it have to be bloody? No. They can wait for the fall, and they can use the event there as a cyber attack against a financial institution, and we can say it was the the U.S. government can say it was the Syrian Electronic Army or the Al-Qasim cyber fighters, and blame it all on that, and that could bring us into war if they get the American people freaked out, angry enough to go to war. And the only way to do this is to crash everything, make everyone lose all their money, and blame it on another country, which they most likely, this is how they're going to approach this. Okay, let's move on here. New Zealand, and we're going to see this in many countries. New Zealand passes law allowing spying on citizens. All these countries know that the economic collapse is coming. They know it. They know it's coming. They know it's going to be here very soon. So they're all starting to crack down of who is where, what's going on, and they need to know, because when this happens, there will be a lot of rioting. Especially the government officials are afraid that they might lose their power. So what do? They have to protect themselves any way they can. And it's better to build lists for them ahead of time so they know who to get and who to target when the time comes, and pick them up and take them away. Now, going to Obamacare, we see this a lot in companies where they're limiting the amount of full-time employees, making them part-time employees, and we see this happening in UPS, and they're doing this. The move by UPS will affect an estimated 15,000 working spouses at the company, and they're saying that this would save them $60 million when Obamacare goes into effect, because they don't want to pay for this. And we see this happening all over the country, where these full-time or are being put into part-time work, and because companies do not want to lay out the money for this, because it is just way too expensive, and this is not going to help the job situation. Now, we know that the DHS bought billions of rounds of ammunition, and they were sucking all the ammunition dry in the U.S. We see this happening again with the TSA. Even though most of their officers are not armed, they are starting to purchase massive amounts of ammunition, and they're just trying to arm their people, the DHS, which TSA is under the DHS, and make sure that they're armed, and they're trying to make sure that the U.S. The U.S. people are not armed, or they don't have, or they could have a gun, but if you don't have ammunition, it's kind of worthless. And we saw for a short period of time that ammunition was very difficult to find. Now, don't worry, because when the collapse comes, and there are groups of people who are storming or creating groups of people to fight the government and create a revolution, the DHS will have their drones up in the sky with a new biometric optical surveillance system, and they will use this to identify all the people. They will know who they are. It's called BOSS, and they can use this before the collapse. So when it's flying around, it's taking pictures of everyone, understanding what your face is, matching it up matching it up to a database with your name, all your information, and they have it on record, and they can follow you and keep track of you. Now, it is still being experimented in the field. It is not ready, but it's getting closer and closer. Now, they say it's not ready, but we don't know for sure, and they're saying it's a couple years out. But it's getting better and better as time goes on. Okay. Now, we've seen hackers have hit Foxtons in the UK, and the cyber criminals have compromised thousands of Foxtons estate agent customers' accounts. And right now, UK has been coming out with a lot of warnings about cyber attacks, and we're going to see this all across the European nations, in America, Canada, because this is going to be a worldwide thing. And the Directorate of Cybersecurity in the UK cited the attacks as proof that businesses need to rethink their cyber defense strategies. Now, something interesting came out, and this hacker wanted to reveal how devastating a cyber attack on the stock market could be. And I thought this was very interesting that this came out, and I just discussed what I thought was going to happen. This was in episode 138, and I continued it through 139, then 140. But let me just read to you how this would go about bringing down the financial sector. And for those people who want to know what I said, just go back to episode 138, listen to that. But let me read this to you so you understand what will happen in the banks, in the stock market. Agents of an enemy of the United States successfully break into the mainframes of a high-frequency trading company. Dark pool crossing network or brokerage company. They infect the system with rogue trading algorithms or change the code on a currently deployed algorithm. In a single coordinated attack, they buy and sell millions of shares of a single company or multiple companies, causing trading to halt or decimating the value of a single stock. Multiply that by 100 stocks of the top Fortune 500 companies, and we have market collapse. Trading for the day would halt, and uncalculated economic damage would be done. The days of screaming floor traders have long passed, as computers now make financial moves in microseconds. The shift was already given way to computer glitches costing serious money. Knight Capital lost $450 million in 2012, and Goldman Sachs is trying to get to the bottom of their $100 million in botched trades. And hackers were able to repeatedly penetrate the computer network of the NASDAQ stock market in 2011 with absolutely no problems. So what they could do is access the system and bring it to its knees, which would make the banks insolvent, which would then, they would have to declare a bank holiday, and they would have to use some type of bail-in, because the FDIC Bank of England document under the, I think it's the Dodd-Frank law, says there are no more bailouts. They can do bail-ins to depositors, which now they call creditors. So they can do a bail-in just like in Cyprus, freeze everyone's account, and again, this would probably happen on a Friday, and Friday in the afternoon or so, and they'll tell you everything is okay. You will not be able to get any money out at this point. Basically, at this time, you're screwed. Your money is gone. They will keep it. They will keep it frozen. Yeah, they'll give you some paper bank stock, which is worth nothing. They might even give you some U.S. Treasury bonds, which is worth nothing. But they will never let your money out of the bank. So at that point, your money would be lost. And if you look at the terms of service, any type of computer glitch, malfunction, cyber attack, or anything like that, which they could blame this on, they do not have to do anything with giving your money back to you. You can't even hold them liable. The officers and the representative of the banks cannot be held liable for these types of incidences. So we have to remember that, how easy this could be for them to blame this on the electronic Syrian army or Al-Qasim cyber fighters and say that they brought the entire economic system to its knees. Okay. Now, something else that is very disturbing, that President is now meeting behind closed doors with the heads of the U.S. government's financial, monetary, and oversight agencies. And it includes members of the Federal Reserve, FDIC, CFTC, SEC, Federal Housing Finance Agency. And the reason this report goes into this is because the last time the president met, which was back in April, gold was pushed down to over $200. Now, the president is meeting right now, and every time he meets, it seems like there's a crisis that will unfold, and they know what's coming. They understand what's coming, but the American people do not. And this goes on to say, that there is a crisis unfolding somewhere in the background, and it could very well relate to the dollar, interest rates, and the massive derivative market associated with interest rates. And we have to understand that back in 2008, they knew what was happening. The Fed chairman, he knew exactly what was happening. They knew that these were bubbles, and they knew that the subprime was not contained. And, for them to come out and say that they're not forecasting any type of recession is to confuse the American people and the public so they don't understand what is going on. They already knew behind closed doors that AIG would need money. They already knew that Lehman was going under. They already knew about Bear Stearns. They knew what was happening. So, just looking at this, looking at all the other events that are unfolding, something is coming, and when they start making the announcements that things are okay, that things are going well, that's when we have to be concerned, because every time they come out and they tell you that don't worry, we're rebounding, don't worry, the housing market is doing much better. Don't worry, the subprime is contained. Don't worry, we're not forecasting a recession. Don't worry, there is no such thing as a housing bubble. We've never seen this before. Don't worry, I'm campaigning throughout the United States to let you know that the housing market is bouncing back. If it's a true recovery, you do not have to campaign and publicize this over and over and over again. The only reason they're doing that is because they are setting this entire thing up, and they know it. Now, Merkel she said a couple of things, and I'm going to leave you to understand what she's trying to say. I know what I think she's trying to say, but I'll leave it up to you to figure out what she's trying to say. These are two things. Merkel says, nations sharing a currency will never go to war. Merkel says, worth it to fight for united Europe. I will leave that up to you to figure out what she's trying to say. I personally have my opinion, and that's how I'm going to leave it today. Again, everyone, be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.